To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, go to gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. Let me ask you a question. What does power look like? To some, power looks like the president sitting in the Oval Office. But it can also look like nonprofit organizers working to change public opinion or people casting their ballots in elections. But there are a lot of people in powerful positions. So when it comes to getting things done in US government, who really has the power? It feels like there should be a simple answer. I mean, political philosophers have been debating this question since political philosophy became a thing. And the founders of the United States even wrote about it in several documents we still refer to today, like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. But the rules about who has power, who can vote, or even participate in a public debate have changed a lot since those documents were written. Sometimes power has been granted and taken away, and other times it's been written into the Bill of Rights. No matter our answer or how it changes, figuring out who holds power in the US requires us to think about the two main concepts that shape how decisions are made: government and politics. I'm Carmela Boykin, and this is Study Hall, Power and Politics in U.S. Government. The word government comes from Greek, meaning to steer or pilot. And in general, government is a group of people within a society that makes laws and policies that affect all of its residents. There are several different kinds of governments, but all of them steer their societies in things like what goods and social services to provide, or how to interact with other governments and nations. On the other hand, politics is the process behind how these government policies and actions happen. It's how groups of people make decisions, including people from outside government. In other words, if government is who makes the decisions, then politics is how people decide which laws are passed and who gets which goods and services. So, imagine you and your 5 friends are planning your high school reunion. There are a lot of questions to answer as you start planning, and as it turns out, planning an event is a little bit like organizing a government. The reunion planning committee would be the government, and how the committee goes about making decisions would be like politics. Both government and politics shape how a nation operates, though exactly how that happens often depends on the type of government they have. And this can show up in who holds political power. Political power is the ability to influence the leaders and policies of a society. And depending on the type of government, political power can range from being fully in the hands of the people to having one all-powerful leader. But it's important to note that political power is not the same thing as politics. Politics is a process, and it's used to direct the shape and scope of political power, which isn't always spread out evenly. And that makes a big difference in the lives of the people who live there. So if all 6 members of the reunion planning committee want to have a say in making decisions, you picked a type of government. When you talk about why you should get pizza rather than tacos before actually putting it to a vote, you're engaging in politics. And anyone who influences what decisions your committee makes has political power. In the US, we often hear about democracy, which is one type of government. Democracy is a system where political power is held by the people. But there are different subtypes of democracy too, and each one tweaks how political power is bestowed and wielded. In a direct democracy, people participate, directly in making governmental decisions, so they hold the most political power. Direct democracy is meant to limit how much businesses or interest groups shape policy so that the government reflects more of what the public wants, which with the reunion planning would be like every guest having a say in what snacks or drinks we buy. And a direct democracy is different from a representative democracy, where people give political power to elected representatives who then make decisions and pass laws on behalf of everyone. So that's like if the guests elected our event committee for their decoration skills, but they also go ahead and decide what's on the playlist without consulting the other partygoers, like only playing country music, unless it's early Taylor Swift. In the US, our Constitution requires us to have representatives, which means the national and state governments use representative democracy. But elements of direct democracy still exist, like when people vote directly on ballot initiatives in state or local elections. But not all governments are democracies, and different types of governments distribute political power very differently. Like, take a monarchy with one ruler who holds all the political power. They're usually someone who's born into that position, and in some monarchies, like Saudi Arabia, the monarch has absolute and unrestricted power. But today, most monarchies also include some form of representative government, making them a constitutional monarchy, where the power of the monarch is limited and they rule alongside elected lawmakers. The United Kingdom is an example of a constitutional monarchy. King Charles has certain, mostly ceremonial powers specified by law, and he rules alongside Parliament. Then we have an oligarchy, which is a type of representative government where only members of a certain party or the wealthiest people can control political power. There are often elections for government positions, but there can be government interference involved. For example, in 1948, South Africa was under apartheid. This means only the all-white National Party could participate in government, and that led to more and more discrimination against Black South Africans until the first multiracial elections in 1994, even though they made up the vast majority of the population. For the most part, representative governments are run by majority rule. Basically, whichever side gets the most votes wins. Or in other words, the majority holds the political power. So if 4 out of the 6 members of the planning committee want a pirate theme for your reunion, under majority rule, you're having a pirate theme. Get ready, mateys. Majority rule can be intimidating when you're on the side with fewer votes, especially if you're from an underrepresented or minority community, which is why in the United States and other representative democracies, minority rights are protected, so certain rights can never be taken away. Like in the US Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education from 1954, sending children to different schools based on race was deemed unconstitutional because it led to worse educational outcomes for Black students. Minority rights are often brought up when discussing governments without representation, like totalitarian governments. In North Korea, the government controls all aspects of its residents' lives. No political criticism or opposition is allowed. There's no representation through elections, and the residents have limited rights. So no matter what kind of government people live in, their lives are shaped by the way they're structured, and that directly affects how political power is distributed and shared or not shared. But even if political power can feel like a nebulous concept, it affects how tangible things like goods and services are allocated by the government. Private goods are goods and services that people have to buy before they can be used. So that means only the people who can afford it have access to private goods, which are in limited supply. At the reunion, you could have the guests buy food and drinks, like how they would at a movie theater, but you might run out of lemonade. Maybe you'd rather all the guests chip in so you can give out cups and plates to everyone. That's more like public goods, which are often provided by the government using tax dollars. They're things that people can use without taking away other people's abilities to use them, like national parks or clean air. Maybe you decide that it's fair to make the drink cooler open to all, like a common good. Everyone can use common goods, but they're also of limited supply, like freshwater fish. The government has the job of protecting these so a few people don't hoard the resources and leave nothing for everyone else. The government creates the mechanisms that collect taxes and distribute goods and services, and that's where money gets involved. An economic system includes the agencies, institutions, and processes the government uses to distribute goods, resources, and services across the country. One type of economic system is capitalism, where goods and services are produced and sold by private individuals or companies in exchange for profit. Socialism is another economic system where the government makes decisions about the production and distribution of goods, including things like electricity, airlines, railroads, and telecommunications. Wealth is centralized in the government and not among private individuals, so that goods and services can be more equitably distributed. But most economies are a mix of both socialism and capitalism. In the United States, private industry sells things like refrigerators, and taxes fund public schools and the police. Ultimately, government, politics, and economics are interconnected, and they all tie back to political power. So it can be really easy to overlook how they impact our daily lives. But it's important to understand how power is distributed and maintained, especially if it feels like the government isn't working the way we want it to. But working out the details of how a government functions is complicated by politics and people trying to gain power. When this happens, we often say something is political. We also use the word political to group people together when they share common beliefs about the government. Different political groups have different goals when it comes to how resources are divided and which laws are passed or repealed. Some political groups or parties value individualism, which prioritizes independence and reducing governmental regulation of business. This might look like cutting taxes so that individuals have more money to invest or spend. Other groups lean towards egalitarianism, which aims to end inequality and usually involves raising taxes and spending more on public education and housing. One person might think that lowering taxes will make buying or renting a home more affordable to people. But another might think that it's the government's responsibility to make sure there's enough affordable housing for everyone. Sometimes those differences lead to things becoming politicized, which is when an issue becomes involved in politics in such a way that the original question becomes obscured, regardless of whether or not it should be a political issue in the first place. Like, a city's response to a water main break can become politicized. It could be used by different political parties to show how they feel about maintaining infrastructure or to place blame for the break. Issues can also become partisan, which is when support falls along party lines, and things becoming politicized or partisan can actually hide how much people in the US agree on lots of issues. Take climate change, for example. 72% of people agree that it's happening, but not everyone thinks it's caused by humans, even though over 99% of climate scientists say it is. To put it plainly, politicization makes policy change more difficult. People in the US actually agree more than they disagree on lots of issues, even when politics makes it seem like they don't agree on anything at all. And partisanship is part of what's making everything so hard. But because we have different groups with different values all living together in the same big country, it's important that people can make their opinions known to the government through civic engagement. Whether that's sending a letter, donating money to campaigns, answering a poll, or attending a protest. And as a result, our elected officials get to know what their supporters actually want and value. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, the reality is, as long as you live in the US, your life is affected by the decisions of those in power. But there are choices we can live with and ones we can't. So as people with opinions and decision-making power, it becomes even more important to understand how the system works and in what ways we can get involved if we want to be able to do something when we're not feeling represented. The same goes for when the DJ plays the wrong Taylor Swift album at the reunion. I am looking at you, Evermore. If you're enjoying Study Hall Power and Politics in US Government and are interested in taking an online course and earning college credit, visit gostudyhall.com or click on the button to learn more. Thanks for watching and see you next time.